Don's back with us, and as I mentioned, we're going to talk more about buzzwords of ignorance, and I'm going to try and get him as much time as we can. And today's buzzword is
family values.
Family values.
Okay.
Take it away.
So, a buzzword of ignorance. What do I mean by that? Well, that's a word or phrase used for its emotional connotation, where the speaker relies on the assumed ignorance of the audience who is being manipulated. And so this is basically a propaganda term or a small phrase embodying a big lie. And I've done a series on these. I've talked in the past about Christian nation, Judeo-Christian, sacred, and today's buzzword of ignorance is family values. Certainly everybody's heard that in the culture wars. So family values are also known as Christian values. They carry this emotional connotation that everybody's pro-family. You know, it's a thing called a glittering generality, right? It's something that gosh, you got to be behind it, and everyone wants to protect children. So if you're against these things, you must be a real oddball. And so these sorts of phrases have a lot of political traction because everybody's pro-family, blah blah blah, right? But there's a bait and switch going on. What the family values that are being promoted by these Christian groups mean, what they mean by that is a lot different than what it might mean to you and me. To you and me, it might mean loving and taking care of each other. But to them, it's something, I think it means something much more insidious. So I wanted to talk today about what the religious right really means by family values, which is control of sex, and the fact how they fund their efforts, which is the business of hate, and then hit a couple of the glaring ironies and lies and hypocrisy in this movement. So the conclusion here, you know, like with all of these terms I'm bringing up, is they're really a framework of lies, right. And this one goes all the way down. And you know, Christians apparently seem to need propaganda to advance their cause, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have a need for these sorts of things. So let's see. So what does the religious right mean by family values? Well, you might say it's a focus on sex. So based on the Wikipedia, which kind of listed a lot of the ideals of the religious right in this area, let me run through them real quick. Promotion of traditional marriage and opposed to sex outside of conventional marriage, premarital sex, adultery, polygamy, bestiality, incest. Okay, that's one thing. Support for rollback of various aspects of feminism and return to the traditional role of women in the family, oppression of same-sex marriage, support for traditional education and parental involvement in that education, including things like vouchers and homeschooling, support for complementarianism, which is more of this gender roles idea that women should be at home raising the kids and not out in the workplace. Opposition to legalization of abortion and policies that instead encourage abstinence and adoption. Support for abstinence education exclusively regarding sex risks associated with early sexual activity. And then, you know, sabotage of sex education as human sexual behavior, safe sex, and birth control.
I like the focus on sex aspect, because I can just picture, and somebody out there on YouTube probably needs to get busy making this video where, you know, hello, I'm James Dobson for Focus on Sex.
Right. Right. And so there's a lot of spin going on, right? And the last one is support for policies that are said to protect children from obscenity and exploitation. And there's an irony there. But if you read through these again, you'll see that what we're talking about here is control of sex, especially anything outside marriage, and especially anything not involving the man in that marriage. So the man gets to have whatever sex he wants, make as many children as he wants, but the women have to be subservient, and there's no sex at all outside of marriage. And from American Family Values, one of their mission statements is about the family. AFA works to strengthen families, to protect families and from government intrusion, and to preserve the dignity of marriage as the conjugal union of husband and wife. So they want the husband and wife having sex. So anyway, it's all very amusing to me. Another theme here is we've talked about control of sex, but also control of children, especially the education. They want kids to grow up in authoritarian homes where the wife is subservient to the father. There's no thinking involved. There's no dialogue. It's all blind obedience. I've talked about authoritarianism on a separate show, but you can go look that up. And this is the reason for this is the best way to transmit Christianity to those kids, is you believe this and don't think.
It's a sexually
idea.
transmitted disease.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so. There's a claim of no exploitation, but that's exactly what they're doing. They're sabotaging the self-sufficiency of these kids, and I'll hit on that again later. So the whole thing is about co-opting the family structure to make more believers, or turning believers into sheep. So that's the gist of family values. How do they fund themselves? Well, they fund themselves through promoting hatred, and they do this. They do this through vilifying gays, and that seems to be a kind of the hallmark of these family values groups. Is they pretty much all of them are in the business of selling propaganda against gays in order to sort of raise money. Here's this enemy that you should be afraid of. We're going to raise money, combating this enemy, and what the one thing they really fear, these groups really fear, is gays becoming normal. So they really hate the idea of gays being in the military. They hate the idea of same-sex marriage, because at the end of the day, gays are going to be your neighbors. They're going to live lifestyles very much like yours. They're going to have, potentially kids. They're going to have homes. They're going to, mow their lawns and do the boring thing that everybody else is doing. But they're terrified of normality. And you hear this quote like, during the lifetime of the AFA, the movement to normalize homosexual behavior has exploded on the American scene. So they're afraid of this. Why are they afraid of this? Because if gays are normal, then they can't sell the hatred of them. So that's what's going on here. Is they lose their enemy, they lose their power. So my claim here is that they are selling hateful propaganda against gays. Let's look at propaganda. So the king of gay propaganda in the Christian right is a guy by the name of Paul Cameron, who is with the Family Research Institute, and he's like the David Barton for gays. He's out there. He makes his money making stuff up, and nearly every scandalous statement you've ever heard about gays was either embellished or invented by this man, and he is. He's great about making links with pedophilia, which is not a strong link. It's made much stronger than it is. It really is. He's made the claim that the Nazis were controlled by gays, and that the Holocaust was a result of gays, and that gays are actively spreading diseases, and there's moral depravity. And this guy is really pretty obsessed about gays, and you wonder if he doesn't protest too much. He's really kind of almost a cartoon. So he's been discredited as a Christian propagandist. He's been discredited by a number of professional societies that have actually issued 3 different societies that have issued statements against him. And people are slowly getting the message that this guy's bad news, and his research, which is all fake, is bad news. So how have the family values groups responded to that? Have they retracted those statements? No. What they've done is they've kept the lies and thrown out the attribution to this guy Paul Cameron. They basically are keeping all the lies, but they've gotten rid of Paul Cameron, and they're trying to hide him in the closet. What an irony there. So the lives are alive and well, and they've actually created some fake professional societies to put some sciencey sort of spin on these lies, and they've been out promoting more lies. So remember, lies are the path to more money with these groups. So let's see. There's a group by the name of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which does a great job of talking about this. They have a good article on Paul Cameron called The Fabulist, and they have an article called The Holy War, which is about how Christian groups are making money off vilifying gays. So we've talked about propaganda. Now let's talk about hate. Well, these propaganda things have had an effect. In fact, they have been successful, I'd say. So gays are the most vilified group in the United States. They are people that are more than twice as likely to be attacked in a violent hate crime as Jews or blacks, and they are more than 4 times as likely to be attacked than Muslims, and 14 times more likely than as Latinos. So this is Christianity. This is an effect of Christianity. There are no other groups out there that are targeting gays like this, and so this is a direct effect of Christianity in our society. So anyway,
You talk about how they're willing to keep the lies that he spread and then kick him out. It's worth noting that, for example, you don't see any of the Focus on the Family people at the Westboro Baptist Church protests. They won't go out there and side with them because these people are generally distasteful. And the Phelps family, by and large, are just disgusting. But they are exercising their free speech. And the reason that the American Family Association and others don't come out against them is, for one, they can't, because the Phelps message is at least as biblically sound as anybody else's. And number two, because they're actually doing them a favor. They're out there doing this kind of fear mongering and of hatred that's the same. It's you know, somebody else looks a little bit nicer. Yeah. You know, it's the Focus on the Family is the Phelps group in, you know, nicer suits.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
With better advertising.
Yeah,
instead of a homemade sign that they store in the garage, they get on cable networks and do fancy graphics.
And they're very influential with politicians. Well, they had a little fly in the ointment lately. In 2010, in December, the Southern Poverty Law Center that I mentioned earlier issued a report calling these groups calling these groups on their lies and labeling them as hate groups. And I think these are rightly labeled groups. Let me list the groups here: Abiding Truth Ministries, American Family Association, Americans for the Truth About Homosexuality, American Vision, the Chalcedon Foundation, Christian Anti-Defamation Commission, Concerned Women for America, Coral Ridge Ministries, Dove World Outreach Center, Faithful World Baptist Church, Family Research Council, formerly the Focus on the Family, Family Research Institute, what I mentioned, Heterosexuals Organized for Moral Environment.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Should be HOMO instead, right? Illinois Family Institute, the Liberty Council, Mass Resistance, National Organization for Marriage, Traditional Values Coalition. So,
you know who's not on that list?
Who's
the Westboro Baptist Church, because it's so obvious they're anti-gay. Nobody has to tell
anybody. I think they were on an earlier list, but these are sort of mainline Christian groups that have been out there for a long time. These are powerful groups. Most of them, or many of them are, at least as far as the influence, as far as thinking in Christianity.
And it's worth mentioning real quick, apologize for interrupting, but since I've mentioned Westboro Baptist Church and the Phelps family a couple times, I've been trading emails back and forth with Nate Phelps, who is the estranged atheist member of the family, and he's already agreed, and we're looking for a day to schedule him to be on Nonprofits. So if you're not listening to Nonprofits and that kind of conversation interests you, kind of stay tuned, because it's probably going to happen pretty quick.
Okay. Well, so somebody escaped that sort of thing.
Yep. So
in response to this, Southern Poverty Law Center declaring these groups as hate groups, so there's been a lot of uproar, a lot of smoke and consternation, and there was even a public statement by a bunch of conservative politicians decrying it on December 15th. This is not too long ago. So far, none of them have addressed the assertions of propaganda and the lies that these groups are making. So it's all just, these groups are good groups, instead of saying, oh, you know, we defend these statements which are false, you know, or we have better evidence for these statements. So the lies have not been addressed. So remember, Christianity needs these lies, because promoting these folks know they need lies to promote their crappy agenda. And this reminds me a lot of a Jefferson quote that I'm going to read here. Millions of innocent men, women, and children, Thomas Jefferson, our former president, since the indoctrination of Christianity, have been burnt, tortured, fined, and imprisoned. What has been the effect of this coercion? To make one half of the world fools and the other half hypocrites. So what you see here is there's two groups, right? There's the people being lied to, the fools that don't know any better, and hopefully people are watching this and learning a little bit. And then there's the hypocrites, the people promoting this stuff that, you know, I believe these folks know they're lying. So anyway, so lies and hypocrites. So just to kind of do the last little spiel here is we have a lot of ironies in this. First off, there's the claim that, especially in this gay stuff, that pedophilia is a bad thing, and that these groups are against the exploitation of children, but in reality, these people are exploiting children. They're using children as tools to achieve their political goals. They are They are for the harassment of young gays, and they have spoken out, and whenever they've been slapped down in that, they're crying persecution. They are for the entrapment of young people in teen pregnancies, and they're for the creation of poverty. I think a lot of these people, a lot of these young people following this path are getting pregnant because they lack the sexual education. They don't know what to do. They're getting pregnant, and they're trapped into a life of poverty, trying to be responsible and raise kids. So, by the way, religious belief is correlated with sexually transmitted diseases in developed countries, infant mortality, teen suicide, teen pregnancy, and abortion. So religious belief is not a solution to these things, okay? And religious-based policies contribute to these problems. So this whole idea of child exploitation and protecting children is a complete lie. The next thing is, in these websites, there is no mention of an international organization that has actually enabled and hidden thousands of pedophiles and shuffled them around and prevented them from seeing law, the legal ramifications of what they've done. And there's no mention of this group at all and how awful this group is. And this group is the Catholic Church. And you'll find that they just love the Catholic Church. They don't have a problem at all with the pedophilia of the Catholic Church. So what's going on here is, if you vilify a gay man for being a pedophile, then you can make money off that. But if you vilify the Catholic Church, you don't make money. You actually turn off the idiot audience who would buy this. And the last thing these Christian groups want is to have people think, right?
Yep.
They don't want to have anybody wake up and say, oh, well, look at the hypocrisy here of why aren't you saying anything about, why aren't you speaking out about Catholics doing this, the Vatican and all that. Anyway, so that's another big lie. A third lie is the Bible is not pro-family. These guys supposedly believe in the Bible and they want to follow the Bible. Well, God's most common interaction is with families is killing them. And if you want to go try to add up the number of killings in the Bible, or the number of people who were part of families, it's a very large number. God tries to get Abraham to kill his son. That's a lot of family values there. And the idea behind that moral lesson is to sell out your family to please God. Men in the Bible have multiple wives who they own, and concubines and all this, and that's hunky-dory. This whole idea of one man, one woman is not present in the Bible.
It's a relatively modern invention.
It is a relatively modern invention, and the whole idea of a woman not being property is a relatively modern thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed about that. But,
yeah, yeah. So women are regarded as war spoils. You should go out and conquer and get the virgins, that sort of thing. Children are property and can be exploited, killed, sold as slaves. Or if you're, the just and righteous Lot in Genesis, you can go out and have sex with your children and make children with them. Okay, well, that's the Old Testament. How about the New Testament? Jesus says to leave your family and follow him in multiple places. And Paul, who was a big promoter of Christianity and one of the big people against homosexuality, was also against marriage and against having the births of children, because he thought that the second coming was coming immediately, and that having...
This is a distraction from working for God.
Yeah. Right, right. So all of this is pretty silly. Let's see. So most of the platform has, of these Christian values folks or family values folks have little biblical support for what they're saying. But, and the Bible, certainly says not to lie, but they don't care about that.
The thing that they do have biblical support for is their anti-gay message.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to go into Leviticus, right? If you want to cherry pick stuff, right? If you want to go into Leviticus and say, oh, we're going to ignore the shellfish thing, and we're going to ignore the wearing multiple types of clothing thing, which are also abominations, and just cherry pick, yeah, you can pull out that.
Yeah, but there's New Testament support against
and this is
Paul
as
well. Yeah.
This is all Paul.
Yeah,
right?
it's just, but it's the one aspect of their message that they can actually point to and say, yeah, here it is. I mean, it's clear.
Yeah.
It's a
But there's biblical support for slavery, and there's biblical support for genocide, and there's all. so
the types of things that the Bible support really doesn't line up with family values a lot. There probably are some things that are.
So it's like I've called it a Rorschach test for the morally challenged. You can go find whatever you want in the Bible and spin it however you want, and it's just a game. So just to wrap up, family values, it seems, judging by their behavior is really about controlling other people's reproduction, making money through lies and propaganda, promotion of ignorance, and not taking responsibility for their actions. And the majority of Christians support these things, at least tacitly, by not stopping them or stepping up to say that this is wrong. So as far as family values go, as far as the Christian family values go, no thanks. My family values are much better. So that's what I wanted to say for today.
Amen.
We got a lot of calls.
We do, and many of them are actually on topic. As a reminder, we got about 30 minutes or so left in the show. We're going to try to get the calls, assuming all the phones and everything are working as well as they did last week. We're going to try and get through these a little quicker than some other days, but I don't want to cut anybody short. So we'll go ahead and get to it, and after the show's over, as a reminder, we're going to El Arroyo for dinner. We'll be done at 5:30, and we'll be down there around 6 or so. We've got Jason in British Columbia. How are you?
Very well, Matt. How are you?
Fine. Thanks for asking.
Excellent. I'll try to keep it short. I know you guys have a short program. Quick story about Christian family values in my family. I come from a family that's a strong Catholic family, and we were embroiled in one of those church scandals with the pedophilia priests.
Right.
So multiple family members within the family, victims, as well as many in the community.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, it was a horrible thing, and it was brave of them to come forward, and the guy did have justice, man's justice upon him, so that was good. But interesting twist is when you have that religion and that faith so entrenched in the community, it did some interesting things. Over the years, we had many conversations with the family and myself, and finally it got to a point where, as an atheist, finally spoke up and said, it's good that we're talking about this and angry, but I'm angry on a whole bunch of different levels. I'm angry that, the family community has such a narrow focus of rage for this one particular issue, whereas the church continues policies such as, AIDS in Africa is bad, but condoms are worse.
Right.
Where's the rage for that immorality? I'm angry that a lot of the people looked at the individual and not at the institution and the policies that bred this. I'm angry, extremely angry, that I, as an atheist, and many of the family and community support this, that the doctrine of Christianity teaches that I deserve eternal punishment for my lack of belief, whereas this priest, who as long as he asks for forgiveness, can actually get to heaven, and the family supports this view financially and all these other things. I said, this is it's so immoral and angry that I just can't accept it. And I see that as an outcome of the values that this faith, this religion teaches, and it's just a shame, I find.
Yeah. Amen. We're with you 100%. That's I feel the same anger you do.
And at the end of the day, I look at it and I say, this is just what this does. This is what faith does to people in the family, divides the family. And it's bad enough what happened, but it's worse when you combine it with this religion and faith and what Christianity teaches. It's just a horrible thing, all in all.
Yeah.
Yeah, the grand irony is that religions often pretend. First of all, as I mentioned last week, they essentially give you a disease so that they can offer the antidote. Whether it's you're going to die someday, and we've got the cure for that, or many other things. But the other thing that it does is that it explicitly corrupts people's moral sensibilities.
Absolutely.
In every aspect, and it makes. It's such cluttered confusion. The note from when you originally called is that people in the situation that you were describing, why is it that they blame the priest instead of blaming the organization that protects and encourages these as a matter of this is their standard operating procedure.
It's modus operandi.
Yeah.
And the thing I always thought about is, you name me one other institution on this planet that if the same scandal erupted in, it would not have been crumbled demolished.
Yeah,
People,
the
society
Catholic
seems to
Church is
give
a
it
criminal
pass to
organization.
religion and faith.
Absolutely.
The Catholic Church is a criminal organization that needs to be
Absolutely.
prosecuted nonstop every time we get to one of these things.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's
And
actually
things
starting
like
to
that, I
happen.
remember you saying, you're born ill and commanded to be well, and if that's what it teaches, thanks but no thanks.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Jason. I appreciate the
That's
call.
all very good.
Well,
Keep on the good work, guys.
Thanks.
Oh,
Whoop. One last comment in there. Don, this one's for you, I think.
Okay.
Justin in Berkeley, how are you?
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. Thanks for asking.
I just have a quick question. I hope it's not too far off topic. I've been dating my girlfriend for the past 4 years, and I'm an atheist. She's a Catholic. Religion and religious differences are not a part of our relationship, not part of any sort of conversation we have daily or at all. But as we're getting more serious and we're thinking about becoming husband and wife, more of these questions are coming up, especially about the wedding. Her family is Catholic. I know that it's probably important for her to get married in a Catholic church. And, I want to be compromising. It's really not too important for me where we get married, but at the same time, I don't want to really, I have my principles, and I have major problems with the Catholic Church and being married by a priest and in front of God and all of that. So I just wanted to get an atheist perspective on how to navigate dating and being in a relationship with a theist, and then, the realities of life being married to somebody whose family is Catholic and wants to get married in a Catholic church.
Well, I'm shaking my head because I wish this had a simple answer. Money and religion and child rearing are really big topics, and if you are at odds on these topics with your partner, with your fiance, that is not a good thing, right? It's something that is going to haunt you for a long time, and you're going to have to deal with that at some point. And as far as rites of passage and these sorts of things like a marriage, religions want to be an integral part of those sorts of things, and there's the whole family expectation, there's the church expectation, and these sorts of things, and you're gonna. This is just going to be how it's going to be, right? And so I think the question for you is how much of this can you deal with, and can you draw some lines, some boundaries that will keep you sane, right?
Right.
I'm in a relationship with a cultural Catholic, and anyway, so this issue's come up, and so there has to be, I think, on some things an agreement to disagree, and on other things you want to sort of draw a line and say, this is as far as I'm going to go down this path, and here's why, and it helps, I think, to establish those boundaries earlier. That would be my advice to you. Is to just sort of try to make up your mind as to what things are really important to you, and get those out and get them talked about, and don't put your head in the sand on this, because they're going to haunt you.
Yeah, and I've got a couple quick questions. You mentioned that there's not a lot of conflict between the two of you, right?
No, not at all. In fact, our religious differences are not a topic of conversation at all. We have so many other great things in our relationship that we hold on to.
Sure. Is her family aware that you're an atheist?
Yes.
So this isn't going to come as any kind of surprise to them. So
no, they're not going to be shocked at all. I actually have a great relationship with her parents and her whole family, and they all know about me. It's more what those rites of passages and those sorts of issues. How to navigate that. Religion is not a conflict for us, but these sort of expectations coming from her family and that sort of cultural
are they pushing
background.
Is her family pushing for a big religious ceremony, or just hinting or hoping, or what?
I think probably the two latter, hinting and hoping for something that's going to be
go elope and get it over with. That would be my
the best advice. I think Don's given great advice on this. You and your fiance should have whatever kind of wedding you want to have, and screw everybody else. I'm not saying that in a way to be rude, but this is her day and your day, and if you try to make it what other people want it to be, you're basically starting off kind of on the wrong foot. Now, for example, I'm about to get married in October, and we will not be having a religious service, but we also won't be having, a big
poking your eyes
Yeah,
thing, right?
ha, we're atheists. We're glad you all came, and ha, you know, there's nothing at all like that. It's going to be a celebration of who we are and what we're going to do together. And it's going to be mostly the wedding that Beth wants, because I'm largely indifferent. But I want her to have whatever makes her happy. So there are compromises that I'm willing to make, and it seems to me that if you and your fiance aren't having great difficulty on this issue, that you guys shouldn't have a whole lot of problems working together to figure out what kind of wedding you have and how you're going to organize your lives. Don't get me wrong, there are going to be issues and conflicts at different points, but make sure that the two of you are primarily living for each other and not trying to satisfy everybody else in the family, because it's never going to happen.
Well, I really appreciate it, guys, and congratulations, Matt.
Sure. Thank you very much. Congratulations to you as well.
Yeah.
Take care.
Good luck.
All right. We've
I'm allowed
got
to say that as an atheist.
Yeah. Sure. We've got Jacob in Lafayette.
Hey, what's up, guys?
How you doing?
I was just calling in. All right, well, y'all were talking about the priest like the priest scandal, and how the priest raped some kids or something, and
Yes.
and how he's it's unfair that he gets to go to gets to go to heaven for repenting, but atheists go to hell for not believing.
I didn't say that.
Well, that's the religious idea, is that believers go to heaven if they confess their sins, or they give their life to God or whatever, and non-believers, no matter how good they are, go to hell, right? At least a lot of folks believe that. It's not necessarily universal.
Right, but all right, well, like priests, they dedicate their entire lives to saving people's souls. You know, I mean, if you don't repent, then you're going to hell anyway. And I mean, that's much worse than what happens in this world.
So it's much worse for me to live a decent life and be punished by some vindictive God whose standards I didn't live up to than it is to be a pedophile, a rapist? Are you kidding me?
Well, I mean, like I said, it's like that's what happens in this life. It doesn't even compare to eternity.
So what happens? Do you really live your life as if what happens in this life doesn't matter? I mean, what kind of world, what kind of cosmic joke would it be to find out that the one and only life that we know we're going to have, that every minute that we've spent loving, laughing, anguishing, is all some cosmic joke, and that the real life starts afterwards? I mean, how is that any kind of?
Well, it's not a joke. It's like a lesson, like a.
I'll tell you this. If your worldview is such that you think that a pedophile rapist, that his actions are insignificant in comparison to some fantasy land of eternity, your moral compass has been completely skewed.
Yeah, we don't believe in souls. We don't believe in this afterlife. There's no evidence for this sort of thing. So
just
you
because
don't get brownie points.
Doesn't mean it isn't true.
Right, and just because you keep asserting it doesn't mean it's true. So we're at a disagreement about whether or not it's true. What steps can we take to try to find out whether or not it's true? Do you care whether or not it's true?
Well, yeah.
Okay, so how do we go about determining whether or not this is true? Because we're at a disagreement about a fundamental fact about existence, right? And we care whether or not it's true. So what steps do we take to figure out whether or not it's true?
Well, I mean, that's a different argument. That's
the question.
Everything that exists has to have a cause, right?
What the hell does that have to do with it?
Well,
you said you cared about whether or not this claim about a soul in an afterlife is true, right? And I do too. Now, if we both care about this, but we don't currently know whether or not it's true, there must be some way for us to go about determining if it's true, because if there's no way for us to find out whether or not it's true, then its truth is indistinguishable from its falseness. So I'm asking you, how would you go about finding out whether or not these claims are true? And you can't just begin with everything has to have a cause. That's got nothing to do with an afterlife or a soul.
Well, you have to begin somewhere. I mean,
yeah, I'd like to begin by addressing the question.
All right. Well, like in the Bible, it says that that God created everything. And
Sure, and Captain Kirk asked God why he needed a spaceship. You can't go to the Bible and say what the Bible says, because then the next question is, why do you believe the Bible to be true? If your source of truth is the Bible, you've already lost.
Well, you see, everything that exists has to have a cause, and everything does exist, so there has to be a cause. And the Bible says that God created the earth and God created everything.
Right,
so,
and other religions make other claims about it. So how do we go about finding out which one of those, if any, are true?
Well, that's where faith comes in.
No. Because if you care about whether or not something's true, faith has no place. Because your faith is indistinguishable from the faith of people who disagree with you. It's not a path to truth. Faith is accepting something. Faith is gullibility. Faith is the reason, the excuse people give for believing something when they don't have a good reason. I'm talking about how do we go about finding a good reason. And if your only answer is to, well, the Bible says so, or, well, you just have to have faith, then you've demonstrated that you are not actually concerned about whether or not it's true.
Well, of course I'm concerned it's true.
Then why don't you take the steps that would reliably lead you to discern whether or not it's true?
And what are those steps,
why are you giving up and saying, oh, you just got to take it on faith? That's not a path to truth. I could take it on faith that after I die, I'm going to be spirited away by leprechauns to the tree in my backyard. I can take that on faith, and now that claim is exactly as viable as yours, if not more.
There is a tree, after all.
I have a tree. I'm talking about paths to truth, and you're making appeals to faith, and that's not a path to truth. Faith is a give-up. It's the point at which you stop seeking truth and just say, I can't figure out how to get any farther, so I'm just going to go ahead and accept this answer because it feels right or because I don't want to keep looking. It's not a path to truth. And it's the thing that I would encourage people to do is to actually go around and think about how you find out whether or not something's true in every other aspect. Because I guarantee you that you don't use faith for finding truth outside of your religious claims.
Well, but if we were absolutely certain that God existed, then there would be no room for having faith.
Okay,
it would be pointless.
So what?
First of all, we don't need to be absolutely certain. We can be reasonably certain. But second of all, okay, so there's no room for faith. I'm fine with that. Why would anybody want to make room for faith? Why would you think faith is a good thing?
Well, because if you don't have faith in something, how can you trust it?
No. I can have trust in things and I can have confidence in things based on evidence, based on I have reasonable expectations about what's going to happen because there's a past record that has provided evidence for things. If I drop this pen, I don't have to have faith that it's going to fall down and hit the table.
But, all right, we do have some reasonable evidence to believe that there's a God.
What?
That everything exists, and nothing can exist without a creator.
No. Wow. I'm sorry, but having gone over these arguments a lot of times, I'd recommend actually go over to wiki.ironchariots.org and look up arguments for the existence of God, because we've got responses up there for the vast majority of these. And you cannot simply say that because everything exists, there must be a creator. There's, depending on how you structure, first of all, it's not a logical argument, but depending on how you structure it into a logical argument, there could be any one of a dozen fallacies that get you from I exist, therefore God. And they're all flawed. If they weren't, it would be a Nobel frickin' Prize.
So we've looked at
then
these.
How do you explain how they exist if there is no creator? Then how do things exist, and how are things so complex?
First of all, complexity has absolutely nothing to do with it. And second of all, assume that we have no answer, right?
Okay.
Then the answer is I don't know. The answer doesn't become I can't think of anything better, therefore a God did it. That is called the argument. That is called the argument.
Years old.
What's that?
If we have a holy book that's 4,000 years old that says that there is a God who created things,
no,
then
I'm sorry. The age of your claims Neither the age of your claims, nor the number of people who believe them, nor the strength of their convictions has any bearing at all on whether or not those claims are likely to be true. And there are claims that are older than the book that you're pointing to, by the way, and you disregard those. Matter of fact, you disregard every other claim by every other religion, and you have absolutely no grounds for doing so.
But
You make a special case for the religion that you believe, and you only want to justify it by appealing to faith. That's not somebody who's interested in whether or not something's true.
Well, there are no claims that are as old as this one that say that there was one creator that created everything.
Sure, sure. Who cares? Why does it have to be a one creator? Why are you disregarding the other various creation claims? You're making a whole bunch of assumptions that are all based on your preconceptions about your own religion. You are poisoning the well. You are looking at all of the evidence and tossing out anything that doesn't already fit with what you already believe.
I'm not tossing out any evidence.
Sorry, what?
I'm not tossing out any evidence.
Yes, you are.
What am I tossing out?
You're tossing out all of the other claims that don't match what you already believe, and you have
Like
no
what?
basis. Every other religion.
But they don't talk about the creator. They just talk about gods that have always existed and that live in this realm.
No, they don't. You are grossly ignorant on what other religions claim, and you're also grossly ignorant on how to go about processing claims to figure out they're true. And you've got what you believe, and now you're looking for anything that fits what you already believe. That's not a path to truth. You do not care whether or not it's true. And if you do, I'd recommend that you start at wiki.ironchariots.org and the arguments for the existence of God, and actually go out and get some books from what other great thinkers have had to say on this subject. Because the kind of kindergarten, simplistic, I exist, therefore God, doesn't get anywhere. I mean, do you really think you could live in a world where this wouldn't be like Nobel Prize and front page news and everybody knew it if there was a logical argument for the existence of God?
Well,
would you have for 1 second said you have to take it on faith if there was a valid and sound logical argument for the existence of God? Of course not. And
that's kind of conceding the
argument. Sorry,
right?
But that is the concession. As soon as you make the Bible says so or I'm taking it on faith, you have lost, and you've demonstrated that you're not in any way concerned about truth. And on that note, I got to go on to other callers, but thanks. Lawrence in Dallas, how are you?
Hey, Matt.
Thanks for waiting.
Oh, man, it's all good, man. First of all, I just want to say, man, you, JD, and Tracy, man, well, you and JD, man, like, I mean, Jeff D, I'm sorry. Like, I would never want to go against y'all. Like, I would hate to be Ted Haggard against you two. Like,
they're all the nicest people you would ever meet. I promise.
Yeah, but you cool too, Don. Like, okay. you cool too. But
no, they're awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. They're awesome.
And it's just funny. Like that last caller, it's just overwhelming and mind-boggling how people are still, I guess I can say, warped.
Yeah.
Or like kind of like have that. That religion on the brain thing, and I was like that. I mean, I hate that, I know that's a cliche and, stuff like that, but I just remember how adherent I was about Christianity. And even in the midst of me, like, reading the Bible and stuff and, studying it, it was things I've come across. Like, I started from Genesis and just went on, and even the things that, like the slaughter of women and children and slavery being okay, like, it was just things like that just really didn't rub me right. Like, like wow.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, the Bible's a great path to atheism.
Right. And I listen to you guys all the time. Like, I pull up all your YouTube clips, and I've been watching you guys every day for a year now, and man, like,
go outside, take a walk.
I hope you, like I said, I'm not going to take up a lot of your time. I hope you guys keep up the good work. I mean, whether you know it or not, I mean, people out there like such as myself really have learned a lot just from looking at you guys' archives.
Well, thanks very much.
I didn't know what the hell biogenesis was until I ran across Matt.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of good stuff out there. Yeah.
It's just sad because, being African American, predominantly our community consists of, as far as religion, Christianity. And I mean, you would think like this particular group, like we would be less inclined to be Christians, and I just don't understand this. Even some of my closest friends, man, they look at me as I was like, oh, you know, you're agnostics, and you know, here you go with your agnosticism, and you know, I'm like, man.
I see this in the gay community too. There's a lot of gay people that are really being persecuted today by Christians, and it just doesn't occur to them to question their religious faith. They just don't even think about it because it's such an entrenched thing. I think that there's this quote by a priest number of centuries ago that give me a child to the age of 7 and I'll have him forever. Sort of.
Oh wow!
And this is really kind of true. Yeah, this is really kind of true. It is a very hard thing to leave the church, leave the teachings, leave your culture, right? Because there's so much pressure not to do that. And so, in the African American community, the church is really a big part of the social glue there.
Exactly.
And it's just really tough to be an outsider. It takes a certain kind of personality who's very strong. And I'm thrilled that we have role models like Reggie Finley and Neil deGrasse Tyson. They're awesome role models, and I hope that more people will follow in their footsteps. Maybe you can do that.
So my question for you, Lawrence, since we've been asked this and we've addressed it a number of times, is do you have an explanation for why there's not a bigger African American presence in the atheist agnostic community?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your perspective.
And why so many of them seem to be ironically attached to the same religion that enslaved them?
Honestly, I mean, I think it goes as far as back as, I hate to be repetitive or anything, as far as back as slavery. Master used this book to justify, the injusticeness and the horrendousness, if that's a word, of that whole thing that took place, and therefore, we couldn't read, at a certain point in time, and then, when this book was introduced and bestowed upon us, I guess it gave hope, in a sense, and we ran with it, and it was passed down, just like like anything today. It was passed down, and therefore, that's how you came about that. I mean,
well, there are some strong messages in the Bible about being oppressed and how to cope in that situation, and that might be heartening for folks, right?
And to be fair, while I will stand by my position all day long that it was secular progressive values that have begun the process of systematically ending slavery, this wasn't done entirely by secularists. There was a huge segment of the Christian population that were abolitionists, that were proponents of ending slavery. Now, they were directly in violation of what their own holy book said, but it was like we talked before about how Islam is kind of in its infancy and hasn't been dragged kicking and screaming into the modern era the way the bulk of Christianity has. And but Christianity didn't change because the Bible changed, because we know that's not happening. It didn't change because God came down and gave a new revelation, because, well, we know that's not going to happen either. It changed because the culture around it changed.
And forced it to change, right?
Look at the things that people considered the values that they held in biblical times, and then in later centuries as you progress, there's a well, not really steady, but there's an upward trend, and it's because of the influence of the secular society and the progressives and the people who were more concerned with equality and freedom and unity than the divisive, oppressive, authoritarian kind of pattern that Christianity began with and that Judaism began with.
Exactly. And I mean, not to disregard that, but I mean, like as far as family values and stuff, I honestly do not see how one could derive their morality from that book. And
yes, I agree.
It's like you guys always touch on this. How certain most Christians, the hell with it. Most Christians, they want to pick whatever is fluffy and whatever is convenient, and but he loves us, and he gave his only begotten son, but totally disregard the slaughter of innocent Egyptian children.
At the end,
the blood sacrifices and rape and all that kind of stuff, and how God basically has a bigger body count than the devil, because in actuality, the devil doesn't seem like that bad of a guy.
Yeah, not only that, but evidently God stupidly created a system where the devil wins by default. Like, I'm going to set up this game with you, and I'm going to give you all the chips, and the chips have to voluntarily choose to come over to my side. Who sets up a game like that?
One more thing, because I don't want to take up too much of you guys' time. I was going back and forth with a reverend, a deacon, or whatever he was, and the best he could come up with, he asked me, okay, why aren't you religious anymore? Why don't you, I said, well, because like you, Matt, I've actually read the Bible, and even if there is a God, or God in the Bible anyway, which is a title.
It's pretty stinky. Right?
I don't think I would want to worship anybody like that. And, he goes off and uses some irrelevant analogy about, the king and the kingdom has to make sacrifice. I'm like, whatever. So, make a long story short, the best thing he could come up with to justify it is the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I want to know, where do you stand with the Dead Sea Scrolls? How is that relevant to?
They're not. I mean, they're old papers, and they're useful for trying to determine as best we can what the earliest versions of Judaism and Christianity look like. But no text on its own could ever be sufficient to justify a miracle claim or a God claim. That's just unreasonable. And the example that I've used, and you've heard it probably before, so I won't repeat it in detail, is I like to compare it to UFO abduction stories, where you can actually go and interview somebody who makes this claim, and several people, and their claims are consistent. They're living people right now, and yet we don't believe them. So why would we believe the anonymous writings of people from thousands of years ago when they clearly knew a lot less about how the world worked than we do now?
Yeah.
Right.
And I have another pointer. Thomas Paine, one of the founders of the United States, wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense, where he argues very eloquently 200 years ago that God would never use a written thing to communicate his meaning to people.
Right.
And that's every argument he made in there is still valid today. This is good stuff, and from a very influential founder of the United States. I recommend checking that out.
And Lawrence, I greatly appreciate the call, and please call back anytime. But we got like 3 minutes left, and I got to try and get one more call in. So.
Oh man, I appreciate it. Y'all keep up the good work, man.
Take care.
Good luck to you.
All right.
We got, for probably the last call, Alex in Pennsylvania.
Hey guys, what's up?
Thanks for waiting, Alex.
Hey, no problem. I'm going to try to be real quick here. I know you guys don't have a whole lot of time.
Sure.
First thing I wanted to say, I'm going to get a little bit back on topic here, is gay marriage.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of arguments that are pretty religiously biased concerning gay marriage, but I do want to point out that there are those that are secular.
Okay.
My dad is a extremely religious guy, but he doesn't have a personal problem with homosexuals. He has plenty of friends.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he's speaking through the viewpoint of a business owner. His deal is he feels that if gays are allowed to get married, then there's nothing stopping them from just getting married for the benefits. That's what he has a problem for.
There's nothing stopping heterosexuals from getting married just for the benefits.
No, and I'm saying that too. I can't say that it's a wrong argument, but I don't feel it's a good enough argument against gay marriage. But it is a secular one.
It's an argument, but it's not particularly strong.
When I talk about how the arguments against gay marriage are primarily religious, and that there aren't any real secular arguments against gay marriage, there are a lot of personal preferences against gay marriage that are entirely secular. But what I'm specifically talking about is I'm not aware of any secular arguments against gay marriage that don't also apply to marriages that we currently allow, which makes it just nothing but an exercise in hypocrisy.
And I have a business answer to that question.
Yeah.
The business answer is all of our culture is based very heavily on contracts and contract law, and what denying gay marriage is basically saying you group of people, you can't have these contracts, you can't have these social contracts, these family contracts, and how does that, how does having these special exclusions for some people advance any sort of society, given that society is so heavily founded on these ideas of contracts?
Right, I agree with that. I would bring this up to him, but his whole problem is he doesn't feel that we are financially ready for such an influx of homosexual marriages that would cause.
Sure, I got to stop because we're completely out of time. But if he thinks we're not financially ready, just think about how much more money the wedding industry is going to make as soon as we allow this. Although divorce lawyers might suffer. Thanks everybody for tuning in. There's the crew. We'll be at El Arroyo shortly. Tune in again next week. Tracy and I will be here to take on more calls.
Thanks to our callers. Yeah.
Be safe.